Boys, we're here to preview the week, so we should jump into that, shouldn't we? Now, guys, we've got two games on Sunday. One's at 1:30, one's at 3:30. We've got the Manly Sea Eagles up against the Rabbitohs in the first game of the year over at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, which is, for any of you NFL punters, the Las Vegas Raiders. You can see I'm wearing the singlet. I've been told before I hopped on this show I had to give my wife a shout-out because she bought it for me, so props to her. We've got game two at 3.
My wife buys all my clothes, so. And Josh's mum buys all his, so.
Low blows. It's very early in the season for low blows, but I love it. We've got game two at 3:30. We've got the Roosters versus the Broncos. So let's talk about the winners first and who's hot coming in.
This is why I'm hot.
Firstly, before we kick off, how much time did you spend at work today doing these stickers?
Mate, I tell you what, my work is very flexible, thanks to my bosses. They're good people.
We can tell.
Yeah. No, we had fun. Actually, to be fair, shout out to Matty G, who hosts our NBA show, because he's incredible at this stuff, and he did some of these for me. So shout out to him. Boys, well, let's talk about the winners from the Sea Eagles and Rabbitohs first. And Burbo nags the edge spot, which was expected, but it's a big win Supercoach-wise, Matrix, isn't it?
Yeah, if he wasn't in your team, he should be now. Look, we're all, wondering what's going to happen, I suppose, in 3 or 4 weeks' time. But right now, Burbo looks like he's going to far exceed the $277K that you pay to get him in.
A few questions around on Burbo, Josh, and whether we're worried about Josh Schuster floating around in the background there. But is there every chance he just returns through Reggie's to start the season and Burbo gets an extended run?
Yeah, I think even if Seabold rates Schuster highly and wants him to start, like Schuster hasn't had a preseason, so you can't just expect him to walk back in. I would give Burbo at least 5 weeks. Like, I think that's the worst case. Worst case is he has a stinker and Corey Waddell comes in. But I just think, Burbo's won the spot of a good preseason. They give him some time. Like, there's no point. Like, if Seabold has desires of starting Schuster, why drop Burbo for Waddell and then have to drop Waddell for Schuster? Like, you're just mixing up too many combinations there. So, I mean, you've obviously got Luke Brooks is still quite new on that left as well. So you want to try and keep it as harmonized as possible. So, yeah, I'm giving Burbo at least 5 weeks, and that's at a minimum.
Yep. Another winner here comes into Jacob Gagai, doesn't it? He kind of come from the clouds maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and he's jagged the wing spot for the Rabbitohs. How long does this last, though, Josh? Are we looking at someone who's got a bit of an extended run? I guess the same question as Burbo. Are we going to get multiple weeks out of him? Because it looks like he's replaced Munro on that right wing.
Yeah, less confident on Gagai, because obviously we knew the dilemmas that the Rabbitohs faced with Isaac Thompson not being allowed to go over to Las Vegas because of his previous convictions in Australia. So that's probably the biggest watch for Teamless Tuesday in 2 weeks' time, is if Thompson just walks back in. But if Gagai plays well and it doesn't make a disgrace of himself, then there's all the chance in the world that he stays there. He'll be fighting with Richie Kenner and obviously, the aforementioned Isaac Thompson as well. Less keen on him, but at bottom dollar named, it's probably worth the punt, just with how little cheapies we are probably going to get.
Yeah. Now, we should move on to the starting prop for the Rabbitohs, and we know that Matrix has kind of created a bit of a nickname for this man, the Cappuccino. Matrix, do you want to talk about the Cappuccino? Because is he still in your team at this point in time?
Oh, I mean, he's named. He's there. The Cappuccino, I tell you what, a $50K cheaper than, maybe 60 or 70K cheaper than Totola. We're all looking at Totola, but let's look at the experienced Cappuccino with a change of scenery. I'm excited. He had a ripper game in the preseason. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the second game in preseason from the Cappuccino. I would have liked an extra look, but look, he's straight in my team at 380K in front row forward. I was looking to save some dosh, and he's got a great nickname.
He does, self-acclaimed. Now, going from one starting prop for the Rabbitohs to someone that could play prop, someone that could play in the middle, someone that could play on the edge is Jai Arrow, Josh. I know that you were pretty quick to throw him in your team. So tell us the thoughts behind that.
Yeah, obviously Arrow's had a little bit of inconsistencies with his role in the South side, floating between 13, prop, and edge. In the last 3 years, he's played 27 games uninjury affected on the edge for an average of 55, and that came in about 67 minutes. Now, we expect Keon Kolomatangi to play 80 on that left. Now, his Arrow's moved to the right. People are saying that that's going to negatively affect Arrow. I don't really see that because the left edge is you're basically a glorified block runner anyway for Cody and Trell. So I think Arrow to the right is fine. The bench looks pretty good. You've only really got Jacob Hoss there to take minutes from. And we heard the reports of Cam Murray moving to the edge during games. I don't expect it to be much more than, say, 10 minutes. So that probably aligns with Arrow at that 65 to 67 minute mark. And yeah, priced at something like a 40. I had his price up there. So he's priced at 466. That's about a 45 average. I was doing some stats. In those 27 starts, he only went under 45 3 times, and one of them was a 45 and a 44. So I think you could do definitely a lot worse. I'd much prefer him over Totola, and then I prefer Kepi over Totola as well. So if you've got the money, go Arrow. But if you are needing to skimp out, then I'd obviously like Kepi as well.
Cappuccino.
Okay. Sorry, correct myself.
Yeah. Come on. No, I'm with you on the Arrow shout. Obviously, to kind of confirm this, you're looking at him at front row. You're not putting him in the 2RF, are you? Yeah. So,
of course.
Having a guy that's going to play 60,
second rower. Yeah. He is a second rower that you can put in the front row forward. Front row forwards are dismal. Let's just take advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Now the question becomes: do you run 2 Vegas guys in front row forward, or do you want to leave yourself some flexibility? Can you run an Arrow and Kepi, or would you just leave yourself a little bit of flexibility for next week if anything went pear shaped?
I personally think that I want as much flexibility next week. I'm trying not to lean in too hard to these guys that are going to be playing this weekend. Obviously, you're picking the best players available in your squad. You're trying not to look too much at what's happening this weekend and how that split TLT is going to work. But I am wary of it. I don't necessarily love taking the 2 guys from the same team this weekend. We'll talk about why a little bit soon. But yeah, I think if I was to pick one out of Kepi and Arrow, I'd be picking Arrow purely because, the minutes are going to be there on the park for him. As opposed to Kepi, yes, we saw one game from him like Matrix mentioned, but how do we know that that's going to replicate? He's had a really high PPM in that game. I think he only played, 35 minutes in that trial. So we're going off a 35-minute sample size for Kepi over a 2-week period.
3 or 4 years of not good
being
work.
relevant. Yeah,
he never had the nickname before, though.
Yeah, I guess
that is true.
That does.
If that gets along to him, I'll tell you what, we're going to see an extra 10 points of value, I reckon, if he finds out.
100%.
Let's move on to the Roosters Broncos winners. Jesse Arthurs is named on the wing. It seemed like it was a battle between Arthurs, Mariner, and Corey Oates and Hose. And unfortunately, Corey Oates has missed out on this one, so he'll fall into the losers category. But Jesse Arthurs, tell me, Matrix, you're a Broncos fan. Are you a fan of Arthurs? Is he worth considering?
I like him. I think he's a trap because not much has changed this year from last year. He's still just going to plod along, be worth 400K. And if you're okay with that, then you're okay with that. If I'm spending 350K for a bloke, I want growth out of it. Otherwise, I'm just taking a 200K cheapie. I think Dean Mariner's a jet, and I think Dean Mariner will go fantastic. But unfortunately, he went too well last year. It's hard to know with Cobbo moving to the centres if that's the preferred side, but I think Dean Mariner will score a lot of points this year, and you should be looking at him in draft.
Yeah, good shout. Draft versus Classic, very different in terms of approach, but could be a better pick up there. Classic, probably better value. Piakura, though, there's been a lot of kind of toing and froing. I can guarantee he's come out and in of a lot of Supercoaches teams in the last week and a half. Now, how do we feel about him at the moment? Are we as confident as a lot of others? Because he is still in the top 15 most owned. Josh, what are your thoughts on Piakura? I know initially when we talked to RFs, you weren't a big fan based on the scoring output in that trial. Do you still feel the same?
Yeah. Even more so with the PCL. Like, I know he's trained. Obviously, listening to NRL Physio, he's a big advocate for return to performance rather than return to playing. And it shouldn't affect him a huge amount, but there is, a couple of question marks over it. And yeah, I know that the trial probably got more people keen, but it probably got me less keen seeing the 77 with 2 tries in 40 minutes. So I don't think it's a bad pick. You're not going to lose money, and he's definitely value. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bad pick. I just think there's better options for cheaper or slightly more. But yeah, obviously a stud, great line runner, and yeah, it might be, great for the Broncos in real life. I'm just not too sure how big the upside is in terms of a classic standpoint.
And when we're talking about so many good mid-range 400k 2RF options, you've got to weigh that up too. Like, how many other guys are going to have better roles or better opportunity than Piakura, better base than Piakura, not be so attacking reliant. So there's a lot to consider there. Obviously, with him playing in game two this round as well makes it even harder. You don't even get to get a proper look at him after this injury either. It's not like he injured in the first game and he came back and played in the second and we had a look. You're playing him purely off the back of an injury, which is a concern. So definitely worth considering for sure.
I think because he is cheaper than most of the other guys, like more than the Lukies, the Lanes, the Firmers, I'd prefer to not start with him and then pick him up in round 3 rather than starting with him. He sucks, and then you have to find the 50k to like, if you start with him and don't start with the Fermor and Fermor goes huge, you have to find money to get him. I'd rather start with a more expensive guy if I have my doubts over Piakura and then cut back.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And we're not going to get them all right, are we, Matty?
No, and just having a look at that bench, though, sort of gives me a bit more confidence. Like, look, Baker, I consider a front row forward, I suppose. Like, Hetherington will play lock minutes when Paddy Carrigan's off, maybe rotate into the second row a little bit. Willison, I would say, is a front row forward and then a utility there. Like, the minutes look like they're going to be there for Piakura. We think Ricky will probably play 80 and Piakura will probably play, 60, 65?
I'd
Yeah.
imagine 80 for Piakura. Like, the minutes aren't the issue.
You reckon they both play 80?
Yeah, I think so. Unless they decide to play Kobe at 13 and shift Paddy to the edge. But I think that's unlikely than likely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily even about the minutes for Piakura. Even if he plays 80, you were saying that he's really attacking reliant and probably, someone you should consider looking elsewhere from. So, mate, tell me about Xavier Willis and Josh, because is Ben Dobbins a fraud?
I don't know. Like, there's some weird reports going around. Obviously, he was pretty adamant that Marty Tapau would play over Wilson, and then obviously the teams were named that Wilson did start over Tapau, but apparently Dubbo said on the news tonight that he's still very confident that Tapau does play over Wilson. So I don't know. The dude's doubling down quite hard. So hope for his credential's sake he's right, but yeah, time will tell. I'm not really keen on Wilson. I think there's better options in Hughes, obviously, and then obviously we saw Thomas McHaley be elevated to the top 30 today. Not that it mattered too much, but I think it just puts more confidence in his role with this squad.
For sure. Now, Satili Tupanua is someone that we're going to have a lot of questions about. I've already seen a few in the comments. He's been named to start on an edge, but the question marks now become, with Nat Butcher named on the bench, you've got to really consider who's going to get the 80. I'd say one will between Su'a Wong and Satili Tupanua. I'd say one of them plays 80. Do you agree, Matrix, or how do you think this is going to play out? Because we've talked all through the preseason about the Roosters and their whole forward pack, and it's really hard to predict what they're going to do and how they're going to play it. But Angus Crichton hasn't even been named in this 17, so surely one of them it has good stocks.
Yeah, I think it's Satili, and maybe it's just me hoping that the cheaper guy is also the guy that gets it. But yeah, when I was looking at options like Piakura, well, Satili at 20k cheaper, 25k cheaper, or whatever he is, become probably an even better option because you've got similar question marks across both of them, but one's a little bit cheaper. He has a pedigree. I think Tupanua is a very good pick and probably plays the 80 with Josh Wong and Nat Butcher switching it up a little bit. So,
do you agree, Josh, about that rotation?
I wouldn't be surprised if they both play 80. The bench is quite light. You've got Lenu, who's not a big minute guy. You've got Nafua White, who we expect to drop out for Maria Hargraves. and then you've got Cheese and Sandon Smith there. So it's not a huge bench. I expect them to both play 80, but if I was to bet one of them to play 80, I would bet Tupanua over Wong. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them both play 80. And yeah, the fact that there's apart from Nat Butcher, who can play through the middle, I don't think there's any concerns over Tupanua's stability or security in this side. Like, you've got no Egan Butcher, no Angus Crichton there, which is huge for both him and Sewer.
Yep. Talk to us about Spencer Leniu, because I know we've all kind of shared the same thoughts about Spencer Leniu and his predicted minutes throughout the season. Some people are higher on him than others, but I'd probably lean with you that maybe we've got to proceed with caution with Leniu, even though he has been picked to start.
Yeah, I'm not really keen on it, not seeing it. I know that I said that the bench is light, but I really can't take many of these Roosters middles, and that includes someone like a Terrell May. I know that people are like, oh, well, new club for Leniu, like, what if he plays 40? Okay, so in the last 3 years, he's played 40 minutes 6 times for a 41, 31, 69. That was with the try and line break, 28, 38. So you take out that try and line break because we don't like to assume those. He averaged something like 38 points, and that's with 40 minutes. So you're asking him to have a big minute uptick and still not even eke out 5 points of value. I just think he might play okay minutes week 1, but then what do you do when JWH comes back? Does he move to the bench? Because we know how much Robbo likes JWH. There's just too many question marks over it for me. Like, I'd rather just take a punt on a guy with an historically better PPM in, obviously, like Royce Hunt, or take a gamble on a Sipley based off trial performances.
Yeah, good shout. Made me smile when you said Royce Hunt. I'm sure we'll talk about him next week. Let's move on to the losers and the guys that haven't been picked this week. It's very cold for Tallis Duncan, isn't it? Extended bench. Very popular pick throughout the preseason, but then we saw in the trials he was more so training, and the rumours are that he was training in the middle and hasn't played any edge this season, which kind of diminishes his value in that pack at the Rabbitohs matrix. So it's kind of, if you got him, obviously you move him out.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you're hoping that he would get a run. Doesn't look like they're going for more experienced guys, which I probably completely agree with, to be honest. So,
any other losers in this first game, Josh, that we've missed?
No, not really.
The Rabbitohs, hopefully.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully, we'll see. I think teams were named pretty much as we expected. I mean, Ruben Garrick, I guess, is another loser. Like, we knew it was coming, him to be named at centre, but it just today confirmed that he's just not an option at all.
Yeah. Gus Crichton, obviously, in this second game for the Roosters, named on an extended bench in the 18. We were kind of hoping that we'd see Gus of old, but it just hasn't happened, hasn't come across, so we can move on from him. Corey Oates, not named as well. Looks like he's been beaten out by Mariner and Arthurs for those wing spots. Connor Watson also not named in the 17, which kind of surprised me a little bit. He's been beaten out by Sandon Smith, Matrix. How do you feel about that? Not overly Supercoach relevant, but we just love Connor Watson at his best, don't we?
Yeah, maybe he's just not quite back to his best. Maybe they just want to see him play more footy before they get him back into first grade first. But look, I love Connor Watson. I'd love to see him play some more footy, and I think he will get his chance this year. I don't think it's Supercoach relevant, though.
The NRL Ron Burgundy, Connor Watson. Have a go at the bloke's haircut and mow. It's very Ron Burgundy-like.
People think like Max King is like my favorite. Like, genuinely, like Connor Watson is my favorite NRL player. Like, and that's not a joke. Like, he generally is my favorite player to watch. And yeah, hopefully he has an injury-free season, can find his way back into the team, because we saw in the trial how good he was, and I expect him to be there or thereabouts this year.
What about Terrell May? Now, you put a really good post up, and I've seen you've said things in the podcast previously about Terrell May and the fact that you need to get over the fact that he's named on the bench, and he's still a viable option in your front row, Josh. Do you want to explain your thinking behind that?
Yeah, so like, I'm not endorsing May at all. I think I've been pretty clear on my stances, but if you are a May guy, like, you have to get over that psychological barrier of just because a guy is not picked 1 to 13, that doesn't make him a worse option than a guy that's picked, so like 8 or 10. Just because someone is named to start, it doesn't mean they're going to play more minutes. Like, that's just a fact of the matter. I think Lindsay Smith played more minutes than Moses Leota last year. And that just shows you. I think Moses Leota averaged like 40 minutes a game, and Lindsay Smith averaged 42 or something like that. You just have to get over that barrier of numbers and sort of work out why players are starting. Someone like JWH, someone like Spencer Leniu, they bring something different, and they bring a lot of aggression that can set the tone for a game that maybe Terrell May doesn't have. He's much more of a game breaker with offloads and tackle breaks and stuff, whereas Leniu, JWH, these kind of guys are more in your face. So that's maybe what Robbo's opting for. But if you were on May before 4 o'clock, like if you're sitting there at work at 3:30 going, Terrell May's my guy, at 4:05, I wouldn't deviate from that just because he's named on the bench.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a kind of a hurdle, isn't it, for all of us when we want starters in our team. We want players because we naturally think that a starter is going to play big minutes, but it doesn't necessarily work out like that, especially with Robbo for the Roosters. That bloke does all sorts of musical chairs with his lineups throughout the week, and even into Sunday, we could see a completely different 17 or a few changes from the extended bench come in at the one-day cut matrix. So, yeah, you've got to be flexible, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And to double down, it doesn't matter if the guy's playing off the bench. I think the minutes are going to be there for May, like not 50 minutes. But I think the minutes are going to be there for him to at least rise a little bit.